Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting about at least Donald Trump kind of going through the fair, doing his helicopter thing, was that he's sort of not campaigned very much. Mr. Trump is not, at least in the way that Iowans are reported to typically be used to a politician campaigning for the nomination. For the simple fact that he doesn't have much of an organization here in Iowa. And what I find just fascinating is that and troubling, I think, for the Iowa caucuses. Iowa has been one of the reasons why Iowa has been able to maintain its first in the nation status, at least in my opinion, is that we get so much credit for the retail politics that we seem to demand from candidates when they come to Iowa. They have to do the town halls. They have to do the backyard gatherings. They have to do the coffee shop. They have to do the pizza ranch. They have to do the all these different small group, small town sorts of things where real voters get to come and ask them real questions and participate in the process. So that's been sort of the reputation on both sides, and what that does is it gives candidates gives other states a closer look at what the candidates have to offer, because Iowan voters are sort of coming out and demanding that of them early on in the process, and it starts to winnow that field down because, hey, you don't have a good message, you don't know how to talk politics with an Iowan, you're probably not going to be very successful in South Carolina or Nevada or New Hampshire or the other states early on in the process. I mean, would you say that's kind of a fair
I think that's
recognition? That's one of the reasons. Obviously, there's mechanics that are involved in it. Donald Trump has maintained enormous popularity with Iowa Republicans despite not doing much retail politics at all. He gives most of his interviews over the phone. This thing in Iowa was one of the first real on-the-ground visits to Iowa that he's had, where he wasn't making some kind of campaign speech in an auditorium or in front of a bunch of people like the Faith and Freedom thing. And I find that very interesting that Iowa Republicans are so into Trump. Do you see that as a potential threat? We've been talking about threats to the Iowa first in the nation status since the 2012 election, and I just kind of wonder, from the Republican side, is this another example that maybe the Iowa Republican Party and caucuses are just sort of, there's a disconnect there?
Well, I don't know if there's a disconnect. Every election season, every 2 years, there's a big debate and a big scramble, and we're always moving our dates just a little bit earlier so we can be first in the nation. That threat has existed since I was a kid. New Hampshire is usually the one that tries to bump us. I do believe that sometimes there's a disconnect between, like, remember the Iowa straw poll? We talked quite a bit about that, and we don't have it anymore. There's a giant disconnect between the Iowa straw poll and the caucuses. There may be a disconnect between the Iowa State Fair and the caucuses. But I think
that's interesting. How do you figure?
Well, a lot of times these candidates come out, they gland head everybody, but you have to keep in mind there's at least 4 months between now and when the caucus happens.
Right.
And a lot of bad things can happen in that period of time.
Right.
So they get, and Iowans, for the most part, are fairly reserved. One of the things that I have noticed is Rick Perry, who I like. I like this guy. I've met him several times. I've talked to him a lot. He's really smart. He's on the ball. He did have a fumbling campaign the last election cycle, which may or may not have hurt him. But his first thing when Trump started saying all those things, Perry started talking about getting him out of the Republican Party and everything else.
Having a pull-up contest or something.
Something like that. It was pretty cute. And the bottom line is that tanked Perry's numbers. You can look at Rick Perry's poll numbers and his criticisms of Trump, and they plummeted. If you look at why his numbers plummeted, people are getting sick and tired of business as usual. You've talked to me on your end from the Democratic side. You're tired of business as usual from them, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a theme that is resonating strongly this year. They elected Barack Obama under a banner of hope and change, and even you, who's been a fairly good stalwart supporter of him, has gone. There's a lot of things he's doing I don't like. listen to a lot of liberals, same thing. Donald Trump is pulling a lot of moderate and conservative Democrats to his flag. Now, the thing is, Carly Fiorina attacked Trump as well. Her numbers fell. Jeb Bush, he said it in a very diplomatic way, so it didn't hurt him as much. But he still kind of said, well, listen, this isn't the kind of party we want. Well, suddenly you have the establishment taking on Donald Trump, and that's just what he lives for. He lives to be obstinate, and that's just boosting his numbers, much like Bernie Sanders, who's drawing a lot of moderate Republicans and liberal Republicans to his flag. And honest to God, when he says something that I agree with, I stop and I think, how far have we gone where I have to agree with Bernie Sanders and not my own party?
Well, the juice that Bernie Sanders has been able to generate amongst a significant portion of the Democratic Party and a significant portion of the Democratic base has penetrated to such a degree that Donald Trump is now comparing himself to Bernie Sanders. He's comparing their two campaigns. He said things like, I draw big crowds, Bernie draws big crowds. I talk about income inequality, Bernie talks about income inequality. I mean, Donald Trump brags more about how rich he is and how he can use that wealth to help the country, sort of like. And that's pretty stereotypically Republican, if you ask me. But the point still remains that they're speaking a populist sort of message from opposite sides of what populism can mean, and to tell you the truth, while I still don't think either one will be the nominee, the eventual nominees are going to have to address that, because Absolutely. I think the electorate is going to be whipped up into such a frenzy by the time of the Iowa caucus, New Hampshire caucus. By the way, the most recent poll that I saw in New Hampshire had Bernie ahead of Hillary Clinton by about 7 points. Not so surprising. Their neighboring states, New Hampshire is. Yeah. But remember,
I thought he was ahead here in Iowa.
No, he's not. No, Hillary still enjoys a pretty good lead here in Iowa. But New Hampshire, what's fascinating about that, New Hampshire has the sort of the reputation of being sort of the iconoclast state for politics. The Republicans are a little more libertarian. The Democrats are a little bit more green, or maybe a little bit more to the liberal side of things. Hillary won New Hampshire to revitalize her campaign in 2008, and now they're walking away from her, and that just shows how different at least in volume the electorate has become concerning a certain set of key issues.
Well, absolutely. And I think Bernie and Trump are utilizing the same kind of staff. Just very few, but making them very effective. Just like Ben Carson. I'm sorry. And Ben Carson is utilizing very few staff, but they're highly motivated. Ryan Rhodes is a good example. Right. That is a highly motivated individual. And so this is how they're staying small. And the other thing is one, Trump, if he goes out and spends $1 billion on this presidential race, he could do that with his own money. Bernie Sanders is starting to raise some money. And Ben Carson really had a fantastic month so far, according to my little birds. So, all these people, if they really gain traction, they can go forward. Now, Lefty kind of challenged my numbers out here, so I did a quick look out here.
I didn't know I didn't know that Ben Carson. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, so Trump's numbers, depending on the poll you read,
25 to 28.
Yeah, that's what it is. So that's pretty good. And Ben Carson goes from 15 to 18. Right. That's pretty much either ahead of Bush or right neck and neck with him. And for a guy who's still raising hundreds of millions of dollars every quarter, that's saying a lot. That's saying a whole bunch. So, you got a lot of these people that are really going to shake this up. Now, we've run up against another break. After this break, we're going to talk about why Jeb Bush really isn't sweating all these poll numbers just yet. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back right after this break.